Sound, its generations, and my physical interaction with an intentional dominion of disparate talisman has always been the basis of my audiomancy practice. However, I would perform these rites with an objective to help inspire or create, never a direct objective to visit a same-skin past self, a haunt. Sound, no, music makes sense as an audiomantic working for this hauntology. The language of music is perhaps the easiest vessel to man the neither. Second only to smell, sound, especially as a composer, is rife with the esoteric intonations of history, echoed and sauntering through the charging, idled movements of rugged synapses and neural highways to spark memory. A mutation of my fervent sound sorcery praxis can commune with something a bit more haunting than an unmoved mover, the ghost of me from a certain time. Scrooge be damned. If a ghost of himself flew through that window, he would have croaked from sheer terror, and there would be no Christmas. I digress. From meditation to communion to inspiration, the next objective is to transpose the notes of ritual into a syncopated practice of self-travel through literal echo and through literal delay, to dim the contraction, to dim the zimzum of here and there, and to sing with the third mind of both. You can listen to this full unedited score and audiomantic praxis at youtube.com/c/PRAGMAGICK or on the Substack keatsross.substack.com. Speaking of the actual praxis, let us now enter the dimming room. Howdy haunts. I am Revelator Keats Rosz, and you're listening to PRAGMAGICK. Today's very special episode is part 1 of the March 18th, 2024 third annual HQXIII. It features a revolving cast of characters both new and old to the We the Hallowed oeuvre. On this episode, we'll be featuring Carl Abrahamsson, Dr. Vanessa Sinclair, Thad McKraken, co-hosted by my partner in We the Hallowed Haunt Crime, Eric J. Millar. At the end, you'll hear from Bob Ra Anana, who will be featured mainly in part 2. I won't stand on too much ceremony other than to tell you this year's HQXIII almost did not happen. There was some fallout from last year, and, well, things have been very crazy in my life. Very heavy and exhaustive. And I wasn't in the best space, so forgive my vocal disfluencies through this chat. It was a fantastic chat nonetheless, and it was so good to have Carl and Vanessa in the same sitting discussing their magnanimous works from this past year. I did well to transpose the audio from the videos they shared from this HQXIII stream in high quality, so you will have that. Interspersed throughout, you'll hear excerpts from my ongoing living grimoire, Haunt Manual, which, well, started this episode, as well as some unreleased audiomancy I'm currently working on for a new Rebel Rosz album that will be out soon. I am going through the throes of editing down the Haunt Manual writings from the past 2 years, expanding on them, designing them, putting them in book form. I got a lot of work ahead of me, considering my first full narrative book and magical writing in published form with Haunt Manual, but also the Divergent Magic Grimoire, which has been out now for a few months and has garnered some great attention and retention from practitioners who are finding wonderful uses of it. You can find the Divergent Magic Grimoire and Haunt Manual, all of the links, at PRAGMAGICK.com. And be sure to check out Dr. Vanessa Sinclair, Carl Abrahamsson, Thad McKraken, Bob Ra-Anana, and of course my wonderful co-host and cohort, Eric J. Millar, in the show notes and get linked up. Without further ado, here's the HQXIII of 2024. Haunt on. For our HQXIII hat trick, an almost antithetical St. Pat trick, if you will, we're driving the snakes back into our respective home countries, and very excited to have so many great guests. My co-host, of course, co-conspirator, partner in crime, Eric J. Millar is here. It's visual art, the drawings, the beautiful illustrations on We the Hollowed. That is Eric. Incredible. To celebrate 5 years of Disruption Generator, which was a anarchic oracle, and it came out 5 years ago. So we'll be talking about that today and celebrating that. And I'm very excited to have Carl Abrahamsson, who you might know from such films as how about A Culture, a wonderful book. There's so many trap art films with his partner and wonderful artist and creator, Dr. Vanessa Sinclair, as well. They do so much wonderful stuff. We've got great videos to show from them and talk about the wonderful books they've put out this year. And old friend, Thad McKraken. How are you, sir? Good to see you. I was wondering, Thad, who people might know as the ex-editor in chief, I guess, of disinfo.com. Would you say that's appropriate? More like a curator for disinfo.com.
Yeah, more like a random person who tried to step in and save it and failed. But there was a lot going against that endeavor.
Yeah, but a wonderful musician himself, artist. You've been doing a lot of great work, and so I'm just excited everybody could show up. Against all odds, we are here. So really thank you to everyone for showing up and celebrating all the wonderful magical media that we are all kind of a part of and doing. Carl and Vanessa's Patreon is one for the books, and it's one that I frequent and love because they're as kind of excited about the process of creation and the many mediums, artistic mediums that, some of us parlay in. And just this past year watching, we have books, we have films, we have, there's just so much. And after speaking with you guys over the years, I've always been so interested in how one correlates the different projects, like throughout, the many mediums that you guys work in. Is it a kind of ritualistic process to even ordain a project, or is it kind of.
We're just manic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's called pathology.
Yeah. Okay, good. That's good to hear. I feel seen. Yeah.
It's compulsive. Yeah.
Yeah, what appears to be orderly and highly strategic is not.
I love that. Well, so I think the last time I talked to you, Carl, was the Anton LaVey documentary that you made, which was fantastic. Which was a few years ago now.
Yeah, it came out in 2019, so it's been a while.
Yeah. Wow, that's insane to think that it's been 5 years. Hey, just like the disruption generator.
Yeah.
5 years. Yeah. But I mean, yeah,
I can link to it.
Yes.
Yeah, it's available for free now.
Oh, okay, that's awesome. Yeah, I was a proud Vimeo.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And it was, that was a fantastic documentary. And if folks don't know, Carl, you and Vanessa have really spanned time throughout kind of the constructs of a culture or a cultnik as we know it, everybody from Genesis Peorage to Anton LaVey to, Topi, you've really pervade like in-depth regions of psychonautic, artwork. And a lot of the cool things that I see with trap art is you both, aside from like Vanessa just put out her novel, which is I'm very excited to read. But aside from like these personal works, you're also historians in a way of this like huge kind of a cultural structure, that I think a lot of us are motivated by.
Yeah, I think so, and I hope so. I should probably only speak for myself in this case, although we work very closely together. But my it's not a pet project, but my obsession in a way, and has been for a long time, is finding the dots between interesting people and what made them tick originally, what inspired them, and then go down those particular rabbit holes. And for me, it's really like a web in a very literal sense, because you find that people that you find interesting and the people that they found interesting, and there are just these branches and these webs of interaction and sometimes conflict or relationships. And it's just incredibly intriguing, because whatever it is that these instigators or pioneers do not only affects them, it affects general culture.
Right.
In the olden times, it may be affected the occult, meaning radical people, pioneers worked underneath the surface, had to keep, secret or hidden away for many different reasons. But now it's we live in a culture that is flaunting in a way, where flaunting is encouraged in extremis. And I think that it's an interesting time, because in between you have a kind of an occulturation process where things move from the occult into the mainstream. And then we see very clearly that key cultural people have often had some esoteric ideas or philosophies and allegiances in a way that have kept them hyper inspired, and their works have then affected culture. So it's sort of it always seeps through in culture, not so much in the natural sciences, because it's neither here nor there. If a scientist had an epiphany or during a meditation or a hypnopompic state, that's besides the point in that world. But yet it might have come from occult epiphanies in a way, and thereby leading to something that's beneficial for the greater good in a way. So I think we're seeing an increased kind of openness, and for me that's very exciting to follow, because I've been interested in this for such a long time. Originally, perhaps what was going on in history, but now we have so many things that are hyper interesting going on in our own contemporary times. So it's just for me, like I feel like a kid in a candy store in a way, and just connecting these dots and writing about these things.
So do you both see, and Ted also, as the curator for disinfo.com, like, have you seen these tethers? Are there reoccurring motifs in people and progenitors? And I feel like in this culture now, it's become almost like, to use a term from a friend, C.W. Chanter, like a nostalgia loop, where it's just kind of loops on top of loops of itself, and a lot of culture has become aesthetic. It's become, driven as like a costuming of sorts. So what are some characteristics of the people that kind of parse out their own paths and that aren't marred with like the hashtag culture, the
Yeah.
filing system? Yeah.
Well, there's definitely a mythology, and I guess as someone who's kind of more on the spirit work side of me, as I have there's the mythology that takes place. And in fact, like the story of how, I know I've told this before, I'm not going to get into it because it's a long, weird story of how I got to write for Disinfo was I was doing acid sex magic rituals in the year 2012, which apparently worked but I didn't believe that any kind of apocalypse is going to happen in 2012, right? I didn't believe that at all. In fact, from what I'd been shown about the future, I guess, in trance states, I didn't think anything was going to end or really even seem like it changed that much. But since that was in things like Terence McKenna's work and Grant Morrison's work, I was like, there is still that weird tether there that I'm going to try to play into. So, I mean, you're right. This mythology gets created, and human minds can only process so much, right? So, I mean, like there's people all around you. If you live in any kind of busy city, if you try and process the internal worlds of other people, and what's actually going on, it's impossible. So then these stories take on legends, and that just kind of keeps inspiring. And I love with music too. Now you've got algorithms that are intentionally feeding nostalgia back at us nonstop, which is actually way worse than I even realized until like a couple of years ago. So yeah, there's a lot of factors going on there. So everybody's trying to grasp to these stories that they can grasp onto. I would say no more from the occult perspective. I had a dream, vision years back where I was kind of looking at humanity from above, right? And while I was doing this, there was kind of characters on the screen. You could see what certain levels these people were at. And so I was kind of like a spirit medium looking at an overview perspective. And it was like, okay, you're not going to try and communicate with a grade 1 person or like a grade 2, but there are some people that have been playing this game long enough that are at grades like 7 or 8. And you can try and communicate with those people, right? And then it was just visions of different writers throughout history and people that were in the profession of writing. So it was, and this is kind of goes on theme. So on one, there's this mythology that keeps percolating throughout the culture and going on. And then on another level, it's this idea that we like to think of consciousness as flat, and what they were trying to show me, and like the amount of occult themes and things like in pop culture these days. And so what they were trying to show me with that vision is essentially that writers' minds are tethered to something higher, and this kind of information is it's being injected into our reality, into the minds of writers, who then feed it back to us through all these different pop culture things. So yeah, I mean, if you're asking on both levels, on a metaphysical level, why these stories propagate, that would be sort of an explanation. And then on another level, you have to make up stories to tell yourself the world. So these stories become huge, and you just keep telling the same stories about the same kind of culture, and it just keeps kind of reverberating throughout history. And the same story.
I'd posit this to Vanessa too, because we had just talked on Rendering Unconscious, which is a amazing podcast, award winning, I am told.
Right.
But with that kind of conceit that this I guess like warring with this digital age of you're also parlaying with like a collective unconscious, but the collective unconscious is kind of made material with the internet and with the ability. So it's almost like you're more in the dark in a way of the the individuation process, because you have too many options to kind of seek and test and wear these hats and stuff. And I just think of when we're talking about these stories and everything, that it kind of removes itself from any of that. It's like, like what Carl was saying, there's this web, there's this tether that is almost always outside of a kind of understood or propagated, medium, when it comes to, a culture or people that I don't want to say move the needle, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I would say too, the internet's really interesting because I was just telling Carl yesterday, it's like all these things that used to be really taboo or underground or occulted are now like everything is accessible equally on the internet. And so like you see it all in pop culture now, from like magic and Satanism and occultism and witchcraft to like different sexualities and BDSM and kink and like that movie Everything Everywhere All at Once or whatever, and like all the different scenarios that they went through. It's like this is a mainstream like super pop culture movie, and they're like doing all sorts of kinky things and stuff. And it's really interesting to see like all of this kind of in the same level as like banal vanilla pop culture.
Well, this actually is a perfect tie-in to one of the videos you sent me, because it's not a cover, but it's a kind of rendition. It actually reminds me of, I don't know if either of you talk about people that move the needle, but Crispin Glover, his album, and he has a somewhat rendition of These Boots Are Made for Walking on the album, and it's
I need to check that out.
it's
that right now.
I mean, one of the few artifacts from my youth that I still have is this CD. That's how much Crispin Glover's stuff meant to me when I was younger. But it was just so synchronous when you sent me this, and you made this with Pete Murphy. I don't want to say Peter. I'm sure he's really tired of being called Peter Murphy. Yeah.
Yes, it gets confused a lot. Pete Murphy's a great sonic mastermind. I always call him from, he's near Birmingham in the UK in England. And yeah, he's just amazing. And we met on Twitter and I love that. And yeah, now we've made, this is 16 albums together since 2021.
I put his Bandcamp
awesome
in the details in the show notes. But so what I love about this is that not only does it tether or it's synchronous in thinking that, this is not a cover song. This is not a costume. This is a reimagining of sorts. It's like, taking the past, morphing it with the present to create something new, and I think that's being lost a lot in, the widespread digital realm, where it seems more costumes, like people are wearing costumes. If that makes sense.
Everything's aesthetic, but that's what cut-ups do, right? You cut things up, and you're cutting up words and bringing new things together to create new ideas. And that's basically what happened. Is if somebody wants to make music with my cut-up vocals, I'll grab a bunch of my cut-ups and recite them and send them spoken word, and I just tell people to do whatever they want with it. And so this is one of the many fabulous creations that Pete has come up with. And then Carl made a video for it, which is always fun.
I love that this is a third mind between all three of you. We also have 23 viewers, just want to say.
Nice. 23rd mind.
But what I was going to say too about, your genesis with the cut-ups, and we've talked at length about this, but it's almost like a refusal to wear the costume of the self as well. Like when you do cut-ups, it's you're refusing to see yourself in a linear fashion. And so you're dancing and you're parlaying with the many modes of self, like all the minutia of self. And I've always loved that about the cut up process.
Yeah, it's amazing. And as we talked about, I think we talked about on the podcast, when you were on my podcast, Rendering Unconscious, it's like I was working on the book Things Happen, which we'll talk about later, but it's a cut up novel. And I was like cutting up memories and dreams and all these kinds of things. And then Pete would ask for more like fodder to make songs. So I'd read from what I was working on for the book, and then I'd send it to him. And so the book is like, fragments of the book are integrated into the music that Pete made. He'd send it back to me, and then I'd like listen to his music while I was working on editing the book. And so it was just this like full like endless looping. I loved it.
Endless symbiosis. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Yeah. So this is These Boots.
These boots are made for walking. Just got a brand new pair. These boots are made for walking. Just got a brand new pair. These boots are made for walking. Just got a brand new pair. These boots are made for walking. Just got a brand new pair. However, one of these days, these boots will drug the psyche of us all. Drug the psyche of us all. Drug the psyche of us all. These boots are made for walking. Just got a brand new pair. These boots are made for walking. Just got a brand new pair. These boots are made for walking. Just got a brand new pair. These boots are made for walking. Just got a brand new pair. However, one of these days, these boots will drug you. One of these days, these boots will drug you. One of these days, these boots will drug you. One of these days, these boots will drug you. Drug you. Drug you.
Nice.
I love it.
Yay.
It also is that a kind of cut up as well of the I got a brand new pair of roller skates, but also these boots are made for walking. Yeah.
Sure, why not?
Yeah. No, it's great. And so what I want to know more is like, so are you sending him just you reading a cut up you've done and then he's putting it to music?
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
and he cuts it up to make me say things that I didn't say in the cut-ups, which is also really fun. And at some point he asked like if I could send him more like explicit content, because once in a while, like we did a series a few years ago, I guess it was in 2019, called Mementeros, that was at the Museum of Pornography in Zurich. And so it was like more explicit than even my usual collages.
Mhm.
And I specifically took like the story of O and different kind of pornographic books and cut them up in like old smut, like Screw magazine and things like that, and cut it up to put it in this like specific series. So I read all of that for Pete, and then he made me say really fun, crazy stuff. But it was really fun to see like, yeah, what would come out of Pete's mind after me sending him all of these things.
I love it. Yeah, and it reminds me, Luxa, who couldn't be here, but she has a kind of similar thing that she was doing with her audiophilia.
Yeah, I listened to that. It's really good.
Yeah. But yeah, I love it. Breaking down the barriers, even of the self. I can't I'm always hinged on that idea that it's this incessant need to test the limits of like your own kind of even principles sometimes with art, And
yeah, first when we had the Mementeros album come out that accompanied, we made a series of collages. Well, Carl made a film for the Mementeros series, and then he printed out stills from the film, and then I collaged onto them, and then we displayed that at this museum in Zurich. And then we took the soundtrack and made it into an album. But even at first I was like, oh no, but this album can't be on Spotify, like it's too explicit. And now like all of Pete's and my stuff is on Spotify and everywhere, and I'm like, oh wow. Like,
now you got the explicit lyrics warning or whatever they used to put. What was it? Tipper Gore made everybody put. But yeah, Carl, that was your eye, right? That you filmed all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Pete filmed some stuff in the UK and I filmed the rest.
Yeah, you have a very distinct visual style too that is very much your own. Like, just thinking back, I put in the chat the Devil's Den documentary. Like you've got such a wonderful way of weaving like a tapestry of visual kind of informational aspects to it. And, very multifaceted as a filmmaker, I would say as well. But, that also brings us back. We're talking about this web, right? This tether, this tapestry. Your work with Genesis Peorage has been, such a highlight, I think, of my understanding of Topi, of kind of that era of creation, white stains, all of that stuff has been so fascinating to kind of dive into. And you both were just at a Genesis Peorage. Where was that?
In Prague.
In Prague.
Prague. Yeah.
Yeah, that was fantastic. It's quite a big retrospective show, and when we came into the space, we just looked at each other and said, it's like being in a Gen zone, in Genesis zone," which it was, of course. But for me, I realized then how much of an emotional impact Gen had on me, because when you're there in that zone and you get exposed to these things, so many memories are coming back. So that was very, very interesting to see for many reasons. First of all, lots of good stuff that we hadn't seen before, even from Coom Transmissions over with Robin Gristle, Psychic TV, and some Topi stuff, and also artworks by people who had inspired Jan, like Pierre Molinier and Barros and Geisen, of course, and it was just fantastic. It's like a real nice tribute. So for me, it was wonderful, and of course, it brought a lot of things to mind. When you're missing someone, it's not just like friendship aspect, but I missed working with Jen in that sense, because we worked on so many interesting projects. Like there's a documentary about Jen, and we made 3 albums together, and lots of interviews that turned into the Sacred Intent book, and so many things. A long-term friendship that was incredibly valuable to me, and still is.
I love it. And we do have a video you put together for Firefly's Last Spark.
That's right. That's I chose that because that album, which is called Loyalty Does Not End with Death, that was an album that me and Jen, we did it together, just like ambient spoken word kind of stuff. And the reason it had came out, I think, in 2019, so it's been a few years. But the reason why it's interesting for me today is that recently Polish labels started re-releasing old White Stains stuff, like old White Stains album, and there's more of that coming out. So it seems like there's an interest in a new generation, in a way, of what was going on back then, late 80s on and onwards, basically, because I'm still making music, so it's kind of uninterrupted process. But this album was very interesting because it was the third of I guess spoken word albums. The first one was with White Stains and Jan, and also Paula, and then the second one was Cotton Ferox and Jan, and the third one we decided get rid of all the monikers. It's just going to be Carl Abrahamsson and Genesis Peorage, and this track Firefly's Last Spark. For the video, I used a lot of original Super 8 footage that I'd shot in 1989 when we were all traveling together on a spoken word tour, specifically having to do with the At Stockholm album. That was the White Stains one. So again, it's kind of a time travel, not nostalgic, I hope, but definitely sentimental in a way. But just interesting also how, even though a long time had passed between those 2 albums, basically, I can't even count how many, but almost 3 decades.
Years.
Yeah, exactly. Still, the Super 8 material sort of takes us back to the original days.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and also those 3 albums were all re-released this year.
Yeah,
that's right, online, and they are coming out. As Stockholm came out on vinyl in a small edition earlier, and they will all be re-released in a beautiful CD box later in the year, I think, a 5 CD box. And there's talk of a label making a vinyl edition of Wordship, which is album number 2 in that series.
Yeah, and I put the label to Carl's label. I put the link to Carl's label, Highbrow Lowlife, in the chat, and there has links to where you can listen to all the albums at Stockholm and Wordship, and Loyalty Does Not End with Death.
Yeah, which is honestly one of my favorite titles of anything ever. Loyalty Does Not End with Death.
Jen picked that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I did in the details real quick in the show notes of YouTube. Everybody's link should be in there. But yes, here is Firefly's Last Spark.
Sometimes we imagine that we are really close to comprehension. Sometimes we are close to comprehension. And then questions line up like captives, shackled like slaves, questions. And they're being led towards their doom, these questions. And they're standing, shackled, standing in front of the slavery tree, in front of a very puzzled firing squad. Sometimes we are so close to comprehension, to understanding each two-dimensional dimension. Is this really a three-dimensional hologram of a two-dimensional state? Perhaps we can grasp redemption by seeing clearly. And yet, the question is, the only question is, are we really simply like a firefly's last spark in that endless night that we never capture or put into a jar? Sometimes we really do imagine we are close to comprehension, and then the questions line up again, like captives, like slaves, shackled, lying on their backs, waiting for the galleon. And there they all are, chained together, being led to the boats, to be rowed to the prison. And in front of this puzzled firing squad are the ones who tried to get away. And they are like a firefly's last spark, lost at last in an endless night.
Absolutely beautiful. Young Carl.
He's so cute.
Baby Carl.
I love
Baby
him.
Carl. Yeah. Also, when I was watching this the other day, the Nick Cave thing popped out at me. Like, was that that must have been during like a Tender Prey era Nick Cave, like
No, yeah, I can't remember which one, but this was shot. I always had a Super 8 camera with me, and we were traveling on this Scandinavian spoken word tour in Sweden and Denmark, and this big spoken word festival happened in Denmark, and Nick Cave was there. So it wasn't like a musical gig; it was more like a recital, spoken word
Yeah.
performance.
His first book, I'm sure, was around then.
And the Ask
All the Angel. Yeah, that's fascinating. Again, these meeting of the minds, right? This web that they all seem to be kind of pulling on. I always think of the Arachnophobia film when the guy's poking the web, supper time, and then the spider. And that's yeah. And that's how I visualize the creative gusto, as a big spider.
I only watched that movie once for a reason when I was a kid.
Beautiful stuff. And I imagine, trap art in and of itself has become like a historical, not only a publishing house for things that are new, but it's also, I know, Carl, you're, the trap art book on Genesis and Brian Geisen, like those interviews, like that pops up in all of our circles, no matter how big or small. It's so you're also, there's this service too that comes with like being something of record, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, for me, it's absolutely quintessential. It's part of, I could call it part of the tradition I'm working in, both on a magical level and also, I guess, a cultural level.
Yeah.
Like Jen promised Geisen to deal and maintain these interviews that they did in Paris in the early 80s, and nothing really happened with them until I just decided to do it, and Jen was still alive then, of course, and it was a great thing because Jen felt that he had in a way honored Brian Geisen by the fact that the book came out, and I was so happy to be able to facilitate that. And then of course our book, Sacred Intent, which was kind of similar, but it was not just a few occasions where people were talking. We started talking in 1986 and finished in 2019. So there was a lot of stuff there, and sort of midpoint around the year 2000, I think, we decided that, okay, we're doing these things anyway, so let's just make a book out of it. And when the time is right, the book will come out. And I said, yeah, absolutely, I'll fix that. And the both the funny and the sad thing was that we decided so now we cut it off. That was in 2019, and I said, okay, I'll just make the book then, so it's in time for your 70th birthday. And I did, and Jen got the copies of the first edition of the book like 2 weeks before he died, so it was both joyous and sad at the same time. But
no, we got to my literal birthday.
Oh, right. That's the case. Wow, even better. Even better.
Yeah.
You rushed them there.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that for me, to keep things in print, we have books right now, there may be some different medium in the future, but to keep the thoughts available, accessible, in my own tradition. And my own tradition in one lineage is, Jan, and it's Geisen, and it's other people beyond that, behind those people. So it just makes common sense. It makes my life very meaningful to be that proactive custodian.
I was going to say, yeah, like a foreshadower in a way. Yeah. And I think as I get older, things are less combustible in that sense. And I think about that. HQXIII, I'm surprised it's happened yearly. Like before I could barely fathom a month ahead, And so just having that kind of forthrightness of, thinking of, let's catalog this, and it doesn't have to be for anything else other than this is a metaphysical check-in, with the self. Yeah, it's beautiful. And it really shows, like it really shows the care, the commitment, and the foreshadowing of these wonderful tethers that we're talking about. Eric, Tad?
I'm just listening, honestly. I don't want to interrupt everything that everybody else is saying. It's too interesting right now.
Yeah, no. I just I want to make sure to corral you both in. You know, we do have a couple more wonderful pieces of art from Carl and Vanessa.
We have so many books. I have so many books sitting here on my lap.
I mean, look behind you. I could say that all of those were written by either Carl, Vanessa, or both. Yeah. But I want to make sure that you guys are welcome to ask questions too. I always I know Eric and I have talked at length about how awesome both of your work is, but I always wondered too, like Tad, with that disinfo confluence, did Carl and Vanessa kind of ever come?
Oh yeah,
because,
I mean,
yeah.
I'm sure their stuff was posted over there, and that was part of just that website, which I didn't realize. I mean, it took me getting older to kind of understand this, because I mean, the craziest thing about that website in general is that it started. I mean, it was literally one of the first websites when I first started using the internet, like back in the 90s, that I started going to on like a regular basis when I'd be in like a library.
Yeah, the Richard Metzger era.
Yeah, exactly. Where like the twice a month I was using the internet when I was in like a computer room in college or whatever, and like it was, and it continued to be a site that I went to on a regular basis until it died. What, it was like 22 years later, I believe. But yeah, I mean, I didn't even understand at the time how influenced it was by Robert Anton Wilson and the whole kind of Discordian concept of Operation Mindfuck, right? Which weirdly enough was in retrospect, a very irresponsible concept.
It was made real.
That was the story. So, weirdly enough, I mean, I'm sort of more of a psychedelic guy, and like, sorry, I don't have more questions, but weirdly enough, like, I'm familiar with like Genesis P. Origin and stuff like that, but like, I'm not like that. So it was actually interesting and cool to learn some of this stuff, because like I'm not like that hardcore into that. But when I was running the site too, I felt like that was always a part of what the site was that we were still running intervals with ritual and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I'm tied to that too. And I'm a guy that practices the occult, and it's weird the way those things would work. One thing that occurred to me there was like, I'm not really the biggest William S. Burroughs fan, and yet the David Cronenberg Naked Lunch movie that I saw when I was like a high-ass teenager is one of my favorite movies of all time to this day. Like, I absolutely love that movie. And weirdly enough, I just realized just recently that I have created this entire dream environment that's a scenario based on, there's like a scene in that movie where there's a bunch of writers sitting in a cafe, and they're all just kind of like discussing like writing and stuff like that. And this is like, I've created this reoccurring scene in my dream, except in my dream it takes place down in Seattle at some kind of like diner by the waterfront, but it's like the same kind of odd thing based. So yeah, it's just the way these things you were kind of talking about, the way they thread through their culture. Burroughs writes this stuff, and I've read his writing, and like it's just I really like his spoken word and stuff, but I mean, like I said, like there's that tie between a culture and psychedelic culture, right? Leary and Wilson, and so it's always just a huge part of disinfo. I was always kind of coming out more on the psych. I mean, I played in psych rock bands and stuff, so like kind of more from that side, but it's there. And like I said, even just the way it indirectly looks, like I'm not even the biggest Burroughs fan in the universe, and yet I like Naked Lunch is one of my all-time favorite movies, and I've literally even created a dream environment. So, on some level, he was also very bizarre too. Like when you look at my writing and his writing, how the exact same themes are there. I mean, I talk about certain writers as being channelers, and you got people like Philip K. Dick and Lovecraft. This idea of like these ideas are coming from people's subconscious and then getting themselves into reality like that, and I think Burroughs is definitely on that level for sure. And the other thing is, I absolutely love and I think they were so onto something with the concept of the dream machine, and just the idea that art should be literally activating something in the process of the user. And
it's somatic, manipulation.
I made a cut up occult film, so even though I wasn't really the biggest fan of this stuff, and I'm more of kind of just more like a psychedelic dude in general, like, yeah, that influence is so enormous, and it's so ingrained in who I am as a person, you know, in a very strange and indirect way, to the point that you know, there's even like a William S. Burroughs, it's in my subconscious that I've created based on Naked Lunch, the movie, that I visit and have conversations with like other writers.
Yeah, speaking of the Dream Machine, you know, Brian Geisen and William S. Burroughs, like, it doesn't get more psychedelic than that. It was the same with, you know, the third mind cut up techniques and like all of that. It was almost a means of like somatic manipulation that didn't have like that didn't necessarily need to have chemical interference, right? Like you didn't need to take psychedelics to induce, you know, these kind of hypnagogic states, which I always loved. I feel like that's like something that I've taken within my own like magical or audiomancy practice. Like, it's not so much you know, imbibing as it is kind of, you know, working within the realm, the shared somatic reality, and trying to fucks with it, as they say.
I think the basis of the psychedelic movement, it's just so few people followed through, is that you are supposed to actually move on to other things, right?
Right.
And like, if you want me to like stand up for what psychedelic culture is currently, like, oh Jesus Christ, like, no, like, yeah, that was the other thing about Disinfo. I mean, I do not recommend writing for a popular website that traffics in conspiracy theories and psychedelics in the early 2010s. Like, not recommended. Like, no. Yeah, the Joe Rogan influence of that show. Oh good God. Yeah. Well, like literal fascist propaganda. You know? Like, it was weird.
Well, you know, to go back to that tether though, you know, when I was younger in high school, it was the Disinfo Book of Lies. That's you know, I didn't realize, you know, Genesis Peorage, Robert Anton Wilson, Austin Osman Spare, you know, Alan Moore, Grant Morrison. I didn't have an overt tether to all of those things, even though they were kind of parsed in different ways. And that book was phenomenal, kind of bridging.
Yeah, same with me. That's where I was introduced to Topi and Genesis Peorage.
Absolutely. And I have to say also that that's a great anthology. One that I liked very much was the one with interviews. I guess that was just like a spin-off of the TV thing or something. It was just great interviews with very, you know, fascinating artists.
Yeah, Richard Metzger was I was a huge fan of him as just a curator of that kind of a culture. And I know he does Dangerous Minds now.net or
which is just like Disinfo essentially been sort of left to die. There's like one
post.
I mean, literally like the same thing that happened at Disinfo that I tried to rescue it. Now there's like one post a month over there or something. Like, you know, he got kicked off of Twitter for some reason.
Yeah, I was just thinking.
I had actually talked to him a few times
on Twitter
because what's that?
No, I was just thinking that I used to talk to him on Twitter, but I haven't seen him.
Yeah, he actually reached out to me on Twitter at one point. I had it was mainly about Russia. He listened to some podcast I was on where I was talking about the literal Russian propaganda that was running through Disinfo for years. And so we had a couple conversations with me about that, but he got kicked off for some reason. But he was on some podcast recently. I do somehow know he's making a show about magic that I think he's trying to pitch to some sort of streaming service, but I have no idea what's going on.
I mean, I would love to.
I saw some still shots of it. Like, that is confirmed. He was working on some show about magic.
You know, people think of like, you know, you hear this a lot in podcasting and radio. Everyone cites Art Bell, which rightfully so, you know, as kind of a progenitor of like the kind of, you know, weird esoteric landscapes of radio and broadcasting. But I always thought of Richard Metzger. Like that's you know, the person that I thought of, even though Art Bell was a big part of my childhood too. Like Richard Metzger, what he was able to kind of weave and collect and curate as like a broadcaster, even with Disinfo TV and, you know, and the print media stuff. So it's super interesting how all of this is tethered, you know. How all of you are tethered.
It is. I mean, I've been reading, like I said, one of the first websites I started going to when, I was like a teenager in college, back when the internet was, and you're right. So that stuff was being filtered through me, like, at a very young age. Yeah, it's fascinating the way that works, for sure.
Yeah, I love it. Vanessa, let's do bisexual expression. What do you say?
This is another film that Carl made from a song that Pete and I did, or that Pete made from my words. And I just also want to add to what we were saying before. It's also so interesting to me, and this is why I'm like, I don't know if you've noticed, but Carl and I are like super supportive, and we're always like, yes, 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 and we're like happy to like work with people and try to make things happen, because it really like doesn't take that many people to like really make culture more interesting, like Carl, like you said, like him documenting and having the Fenris Wolf series like since 1989, like it's created like a whole culture where the like all these artists are great and occultists, but they weren't really documenting it in the way that Carl has, so he's kind of made this kind of like historical record, or Richard Metzner, different people like that, and it doesn't take many people to do that. Like if just one person gets passionate and like documents or creates art or whatever, can really make a difference and have an influence. And I always just think that's so amazing.
No, you two especially. I was just, what was it, 5 years ago, right? Just a budding little pimple-faced weirdo idiot kid that was just coming out of the broom closet, and you both were like, it was just such a enlightening, wonderful. You both came on to the podcast a couple of times, and you were always supportive. Mitch Horowitz too, who I know is your friend, like also same, very supportive, wonderful dude in the beginning. And yeah, if it wasn't for folks like yourselves, I think we would all be grasping at straws as to, trying to find something outside of that costuming. Like you guys are the direct line. You guys are the tether, and having your I guess interaction, even like it's something as small as like how wonderful you guys just are to talk with,
Thank you.
like that means a lot, especially after years of I guess podcasting now, even though I don't even know what that is anymore.
Yeah, but that's like, what I was just thinking though. Like now you're doing that for people, Keats, and then in like 10 years, people are gonna be like, Keats, you helped me open my world, and you were so supportive, and you let me talk on your show, and like
Well, honestly, Keats, you were that for me. You were that for me, Keats.
Oh,
there you go.
I mean, you were that for me, man.
Yeah, but everyone I've met in this whole kind of scene has been like that and so supportive. Like Carl and Genesis was like that, and Paul B. Hampshire B is amazing. You should have him on your podcast sometime. He's like super wonderful to talk to, and like Little Annie and like Val Denham. All these people are like super supportive and nice and generous and just wonderful, lovely people.
It's been a warring kind of conduit with, I think, mental disfluencies that I have, and perhaps like a shyness or like an outsiderdom that's more like alienating than it needs to be. And like this whole like meeting everybody, utilizing podcasting or broadcasting as a tool to meet people and to like kind of give a schema or kind of an outline to meet people that influence or inspire, I should say, me and stuff, was like the magic trick, right? That was the biggest trick, It's like, hey, I got a podcast, come talk to me, Yeah,
I mean, I was exactly the same. I started out with fanzines.
Yeah,
we're talking
that's right.
early 80s, because then I was very interested in comics. So I had this fanzine where I interviewed, comic book artists basically, and reviewed comics, whatever. It was really nerdy stuff, and then it became slightly
you're
cooler.
Speaking to the right crowd here.
I know. But that taught me, and specifically when it moved into slightly less nerdy territory with great garage rock and trashy movies and stuff, and the fanzine that followed, because that taught me to I don't know, be brave in a way. You just knock that backstage door and see what happens, and something will come out of it, and you get some good snapshots. It only takes a fraction of a second to take a good picture, and you just need some good, chit chat for a good interview, basically. And that I took on further with the Fenris Wolf and all of my occult adventures was the same kind of spirit. Wow, I admire this person so much, but I'm still going to knock the door. We'll see what happens. Overcoming, transcending my initial, I wouldn't say fear, but this thing you're anxious about whether they say no or whether they think I'm an idiot, whatever.
Yeah,
but in my case,
more the latter.
More and more positive feedback. So it's just I'm still surfing that same wave.
Yeah, and Anton LaVey was super supportive too, right?
Yeah,
and maybe there's a running theme for this Honquinox is we are finding these tethers between these folks, and that's the thing. There's support. There's an undeniable supporting kind of nature to them that they're excited, to be around folks that they won't be judged by. I think that's a big thing.
Yeah, and I get it. Sure. Don't ask dumb questions.
Yeah.
No, I think also one very interesting quote is from, I once interviewed Bob Colacello, who was the editor of Interview magazine and worked at Warhol for a long time. And, they were really social animals, going out every night. And, that was their business in a way, a very active networking, both for art sales, but also, to produce Interview magazine. And Colacello said that Warhol helped me get through the door the first time, but it was all me that I got invited back. You can come through a door through the help of someone else, but it's still up to you whether you will be that person that is welcome in this environment that you want to get into. And I thought that was kind of poignant in a simple way, but still,
I love that. Yeah. An open door policy, as they say here in the States. Yeah. And also I think the excitement or this tenor about wanting to be challenged, or the excitement of being I guess challenged about these big philosophical ideas, and we're just looking for people to spar with, in that sort of way to kind of help kind of refine or inspire, and I think that's what it is it's sparking the mundane, in that route.
Yeah, and also finding magicians that get it. Like we talked about before, that we were just in Prague at Genesis's kind of retrospective. And as Carl mentioned, I was much more emotional than it kind of caught me off guard. I didn't realize I was going to be so emotional, but it was the first time I'd been in Jen's space since Jen has died, since Jen has dropped her body. And things that used to be in her apartment were in this museum. It's weird, but good, but weird. But that was the thing too. Carl gave a talk with Nicolas Ballet after they showed the Coombe Transmissions film Other Like Me, which was fantastic. And even the place was packed, and these are people who came there specifically for this film. They're interested in Jen, they're interested in Throbbing Gristle, they're interested in all this stuff, but still didn't know about the magical aspects. And this is what really blows my mind, because even the magical aspect is kind of even more underground than the underground, and people don't even realize these are all magical workings that you're looking at that are presented as works of art. And someone even asked Carl and the panel, but what is about the art, what up there is magical, because actually it wasn't being talked about. And Carl, you brought it up several times and kept mentioning the occulture and mentioning the art as magical. And then someone's like, well, what about the art is magical? And it's literally you're looking at literal sigils. Like they're not just collages created like for aesthetic value. Like these are sigils. And like, why do you think, it says like mixed media with like, blood, cum, and spit, like with human excretions, it's like Jen's not putting those there for fun,
right,
because
to
he's
be
psychotic
edgy
or something.
yeah
Exactly. It's like these are magical works. And the whole Pandrogyny project, people think it's just about gender transition.
that one is just so the Pandrogyny, with Lady J, just that entire working in and of itself is so transcendent and like brave in ways of which I'm not sure I can fathom sometimes, but understand like how beautiful it like really is, and yeah, that their relationship really sings to me as we were talking about earlier with the dream machine and working in these somatic elements to induce things like body modification has that too. I remember Jen being a part of Sacred and Profane body modification book that an old friend of mine who ran a piercing studio in Portland, a rather famous one, had. And that was kind of like the first time I kind of understood the, that semblance of why somebody would go through that or somebody would do that. And just deeper on levels that, I exalt, but I cannot share right now. You know what I mean? It's just lovely stuff.
Yeah, it's profound work. It's a profound.
The one thing I'd say
work.
there is that it does not surprise me at all that like the spiritual element is largely being kind of taken out of it, because I mean, there's just such a bias. I seem to be the one person that only talks about, like a lot of people we're so ingrained with materialist spiritual philosophy that we don't even talk about how systemic it is and how, I mean, I was indoctrinated it in school on both the high school and college level, that animism is a wrong philosophy that we've defeated with our scientific rationalism. And, and you would think I'd be excited about living in a time like psychedelics and UFOs, two things that I like. And yet, why have those actually become more popular in mainstream culture? And the answer to that question is because the people that are pushing them completely are aware of how controversial the spiritual aspect of them are, so they're intentionally taking it out. So that's, I mean, when you're doing psychedelics, but it's this materialist version of psychedelics where it's just about self-improvement, right? It's just about being a better productive worker bee or peak optimization as an athlete or whatever, right? And it's the same thing with UFOs. There's this whole spiritual side, but what's actually being discussed in Congress, like they are intentionally avoiding that on purpose, and they will willingly admit that. Like they're doing that on purpose because they know if we want to get this to a mainstream audience, we have to extract the spirituality from it because that's just too controversial. That's off limits, right? Like, yeah. So I'm not entirely sure that's going on. That just might be, with the kind of more occult people. But yeah, no, it is fascinating to watch occult works and like people don't even know that's what they're watching, right?
It's insane.
That doesn't really.
I just heard not to hark on Joe Rogan. It's not about Joe Rogan or anything, but like Cat Williams.
No, please feel free.
I actually never listened to him, but yes.
So I heard this thing. It came into my purview because Cat Williams was on and talked about the dark cabal, and the reason why transgenderism is happening is because Baphomet. And I was like, correct.
Great.
Bring it on.
Wonderful.
You're right. Androgyny, like Solva and Coagula, like what do you want, yeah. But I just thought it was so funny that's the reason why it's a lot of these things are in the sphere is these absolutes of very stark contrasting opinions of them. And it's so funny that it seems it's like such an honest and natural progression towards a fucking a meeting of both those contrasts, but people are very scared of that progress. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I wore my magical necklaces. These are my Sihu Hata pendants from B Hampshire, and this is my Pandragony pendant from Genesis and Lady J.
Oh, lovely.
Nice.
Well, I did want to play another
Perfect.
Vanessa
Now it's
Sinclair
perfect. Bisexual expression.
bisexual expression. Look
Now
at that.
it The cutting up of language and love is bisexual. I open my full red lips. Chemistry growing between us. We are in the era of bisexual expression. What's it like? What's it like? What's it like being bisexual? Night after night, I party with people like him. Sexual connection. These are the spaces where we are penetrated night after night after night after night. Sexual acts. My full red bliss. Night after night after night after night. Night after night after night after night. Night after night after night after night. If you don't feel and believe in what's going on, everything will be a barren and soulless endeavor. Planet 9.
Beautiful. I
Nice.
love the Plan
Very
9 shout out.
Okay, so Planet 9 is actually okay.
Edward,
So that
yeah.
leads us into my book, Things Happen, which is my first cut-up novel.
Uh-huh.
And basically, I can do a little tiny reading from it if you don't mind. Planet
Oh,
9.
yeah.
This is Planet 9. So basically, this is my life. Okay. So I grew up in Miami I came of age as a teenager in the early 90s. And of course, in the 80s in Miami, it was like overrun by what's now called the cocaine cowboys. And where it was like lots of drug cartels taking over. Like there's movies about it now, documentaries where like they had to like put people in like there were so many dead bodies, they had to like put them in like Burger King cold trucks and like have them on the side of the street and this kind of thing.
Burger King, that's just insult to injury.
Yeah, and there was like a Time magazine cover called like Paradise Lost, all about like all this chaos that was
yeah.
happening in Miami. So there comes me, and there was this hotel in my neighborhood. I grew up in Coconut Grove, which is famously where Jim Morrison was arrested from his like infamous performance.
Mhm.
And
That's
that happened.
another synchronous thing. I was just watching
My mom
a little,
was at that show.
documentary about that exact show.
And actually,
was
Carl
arrested.
published a book about Jim Morrison also this year called
What?
This is the Strangest Life
Yeah.
I've Ever Known. Carl didn't write it. He published it. It's by an author named Anna Leorne. But if you haven't read it, don't sleep on this book.
Yeah, I'm not gonna yeah, there's so many good trap art books. I want to put trap art in the chat, but yeah, please, give us a little reading of your.
This book is
This
so
is your
good though.
debut,
I've read this book 3
right?
times already. I just have to. I'm plugging Anna's book. It's so good. I've read it 3 times because also she's like magical, and she writes for like like Rolling Stone or these kinds of like big magazines, and she did like a historical record of Jim Morrison, but she also looked at like his astrological chart, like his natal chart, and talks about him like astrologically, and like she's right up our alley. So
Sagittarian
we don't have this.
energy.
And this is an amazing cover photo by Carl at Jim Morrison's grave when it was Jim Morrison's grave like this, which is awesome. But anyway, then in comes Vanessa. Things happen. And these are actual pictures from my life. Like this is me and my best friend at the
Vanessa.
time. Yeah, this is like the park we hung out in. And there was this hotel in my neighborhood that I went to like a little Christian school when I was a little kid, like until age 12. And literally across the street from this Christian school was this hotel called the Mutiny. And I didn't find out till like, I don't know, since I've lived in this house, which is the past like 3 years, like what an insane cocaine cartel hotel this was, where it was like, this was like actually like ground zero where like all the cartels met, and they met with like the DEA and all the different like government agencies and like made deals to not get caught and this kind of thing. And like, this was like across the street from my elementary school. And then there was this huge hurricane in 1992 that like completely wiped out Miami, which was Hurricane Andrew. It was a category 5. And I went through this hurricane and it was, horrendous and traumatic. We went through the literal eye of the storm, and that wiped out this hotel. So it was abandoned. And then like, because this hurricane happened, my mom like snapped and like kicked out my dad and like kicked me out. And like, I was like living on the street for a while. And I used to sleep in this hotel with my friend Jessica, and she made a little place for us. This is actually us on the 9th floor.
Let me see if I can
can you see it? She actually scratched in the wall above the bed, like, "Don't sleep here, mine." Up here. "Don't sleep here, mine." And that's her trunk of clothes and a little bed mattress she put up there. And it was on the 9th floor because she said as long as, like, most people that were squatting there stayed on the first 2 floors, and we're not with it enough.
So that was your like American Dial House kind of
all the people smoking crack were on the first 2 floors, and they didn't bother to come up to the 9th floor. So we hung up on the 9th floor, which we called Planet 9. And we also hung out on the roof. And so my friend Jessica that I lived there with, she actually was killed, which we talked about a little bit on the podcast, in 2020, because part of what happened during the pandemic with everybody locked inside, a big rise in domestic violence happened, and it happened to a lot of people. There was a lot more domestic violence happening. And sadly, my friend Jessica was a victim of this kind of violence, and her boyfriend that she was breaking up with shot her, and he also shot himself. So he is dead. So not to be a downer, but that's just reality. So I dedicated this to her.
Yeah. I just want to say, I'm sorry to hear that, but I do love that you always give the coda like he's dead, like no need for revenge. Motherfucker's dead. Yeah.
Well, because you want revenge, but there's nothing you can do. He killed himself.
There's nothing you can do. He's dead.
It's done already. It's done. So they're both dead. But so I dedicated this book to her, and then also little Annie, because little Annie, of course, is the lyricist of the Coil song "Things Happen."
Oh, that's right.
Which is where the title of the book comes from. And "Things Happen" is such a special song in my life because when I heard that song when I was like 15 or 16 and living in this abandoned hotel, cocaine gangster hotel, I was just like, this is amazing. Who are these people? Like, these are my kin, like I want more of this, because this is Miami. You have to understand everything's like Gloria Estefan and Julio Iglesias. There's no Coil, It's pink and pastel and pina coladas and stuff, right? With the underground being like this cocaine trafficking.
Well, sorry, not to derail, but thing came to mind. Wasn't the guy that killed Versace's name, like that serial killer, wasn't his name Andrew as well?
Yes.
So Andrew should never go to Miami. is what I'm hearing.
I've had a lot of weird Andrews in my life.
Yeah. They're not, no bueno.
And actually, there's even a line in this book that says like he had the same name as like the hurricane, and so like I could never trust him. Like that's real.
Interesting.
Sorry, Andrews of the world.
Yes.
That name is
Andy's different.
Yeah. But I'm sure there's plenty of nice Andrews, of course.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, but this book is like it's created in the cut up method and has dreams mixed in and things like that, like weird synchronicities and lyrics from songs that Pete made out of my words. So they're like my words, but put together a way that Pete made them rather than the way I originally said them. And I string them all throughout the book. So it ends up giving you this kind of like, I really liked it the last time I read it before it went to press. Like it really gives you this kind of like meandering, kind of chaotic feeling. And like, yeah, it keeps you fragmented, like you were talking about earlier, like where your identity is not really solid, your memories aren't really solid. You're like, wait, did that really happen? Or is this happening? Or was it this person or this person? And it kind of gives you a feeling of like, kind of feeling like you're grasping something and then like, nope, you've lost it again, which I kind of think is like life.
Yeah, and also, I mean, you're a psychoanalyst, so you'd be the perfect person to talk to about that. But like, I feel that, you know, the stuff that I was doing with Haunt Manual, I'm starting to realize that memory is a defense mechanism, and it's like this, you know, narrative that we're building ourselves as a defense mechanism, as a survival tactic. Welcome to the Haunt Manual, a multimedia grimoire exploring my personal anarchic praxis of the hauntology of the self, dubiously named Hauntomancy. This following chapter, Sine Wave Serpents, will explore not only the meditation that sparked the praxis, but the audiomancy praxis itself, of which you are hearing the score of right now. (2017), the year of my public magical birth. The year that burned brightly through hip shooting and bandit-like expression, experimentation, and abandon. 5 years ago, this meditation helped me realize the specter of self I have since forgotten. Though it forever reverberated brightly in the prism of self, I had not given it reverence. I must create a seance of the self of then, and commune with the ghost of what had been. I must practice a necromancy of self, and help incur the motivations and wonderment that has set me on this very path. And this is how I am doing it, and it hurts. Memory is a defense mechanism, burned and birthed by the ramshackle need to absolve guilt, remorse, regret. It is a creative fiction at times, one that paints the pareidolia of making meaning out of past patterns and actions. That said, it is not always negative. The negativity comes with the broad erasure of responsibility, of mistakes. Not unlike an algorithmic AI, it tends to snuff out human error. And the human error element is usually what spurns a self into the path we ride. Yeah.
In general, I'm a fan of any form of art that's trying to disrupt someone's sense of self and put them into something larger than their self. There's not enough art that is doing that, unfortunately.
That's real art.
Yeah, exactly. That's the true purpose of art, and unfortunately,
not conceptual art.
So much of art is really just trying to just sell you shit at this point, and keep
yeah, exactly. Like my mom's an artist, and her gallery told her to make sure that your paintings are like similar so that people can recognize your style. So they're basically just telling you to like make yourself a brand so you can be marketable. That's not like being an artist.
Hate it.
Hate it. Yeah, no, we talked about that too. Also, Vanessa's mom has the same birthday as me.
Yes, and little Annie.
And little Annie.
And Paula Peorage. It's a magic day.
Well, and then the day after Genesis. But everybody, Mr. Bob Raw, Temple of Babylon Karanzan, listening post alpha. So good of you to join, sir. Good to see you, man.
Greetings. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh yeah, in that sweet,
all right, good deal.
Molasses voice of yours.
Laughing Ghost signing in.
Yeah. But yeah, we were oh god, this has been brilliant. I did want to play Carl. Can you tell me about, so I do love this, but what is Cotton Furrow?
Is
it Furrow?
Ferox.
Ferox.
It's the band name of that musical project I had between 2000 and 2018, basically. It was built on contrast. It's like the concept was always contrast. Cotton is, of course, nice and fluffy and white, but ferox is a suffix to plants that are sick. Flowers that are sick.
You're a portmanteau contraster as well. Yeah,
that's right. But before we delve into that, I think we wanted to hear from Things Happen, right? Just a little snippet from Vanessa's
if you
book.
want to, it's okay.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah,
it's okay.
I want to. It's a great.
I do too. Yeah.
Carl's my biggest fan, and I'm Carl's biggest fan.
Well, my brain is so scattered. I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm a host, not someone just having fun.
You're the hostess with the mostest.
Yeah, with the
Okay,
least.
I'll just read a little bit just to give you a taste, and just to finish the whole, because the past, present, future thing we were talking about and everything connecting. So also the book is dedicated to Jessica, my friend, and little Annie. And little Annie has also moved to Miami. And Carl's friends with Michael Jura and Swans, and he went to a Swans concert when Carl and I first got married. And little Annie was opening for them. And
you had me at Jura.
Yeah, little Annie was opening for Swans, and Carl gave her my first book of poetry, and she had just moved to Miami, and he said, well, my wife is from Miami, and I was stuck in Miami a lot when I was like moving to Sweden because I was having problems with my residency permit and all this bureaucracy. So I ended up like hanging out with little Annie the whole time I was stuck in Miami, and like showing her around and driving her different places, which was really fun. And now we're still very good friends, and I love her. And this song has the lyrics from Things Happen, the song, the Coil song. And if you're a fan of that song, it basically has the first line at the beginning, and then the very last line of the book is the last line of the song. So by the time you finished reading the book, you've also read all the lyrics to Things Happen, the song. Okay, I will read from it then.
Sorry, I put myself on mute because like I'm trying to. Yeah, I just want to imbibe. Things happen.
Okay, I'll just start at the beginning then. And you can just stop me when it's time for me to stop. Or I'll probably stop before that.
There'll be a digital hook that I put through the... No, I'm just kidding.
Start playing the music. All right, now I have to be serious. He shot her point blank in the back. Ivy exhaled smoke as she snubbed out her cigarette, then immediately searched her purse for another one. She pulled out a crumpled pack and peered inside, but it was empty. She looked up at him. Daddy, do you have a cigarette for me? Sure, doll. Victor picked up his silver cigarette case and flipped open the lid to offer her a clove. Ivy placed the jar in black between her full red lips as he pulled out a Zippo lighter from his pocket. She leaned in as his thumb flicked the wheel, and he cupped his hands around the flame to block the wind as she lit her cigarette. Ivy gazed up at him as she sucked on the end of the clove a few times until it was well lit. "Thanks," she said as she exhaled and turned away. I find it difficult to look at anyone as I utter these words. They lived in the heart of Coconut Grove, a sunny place for shady people. For years, Ivy and Sally attended every goth and fetish party in the South Florida scene. I can still picture her sitting there. Sally sat cross-legged on the floor in the living room of Bobby and Desiree's apartment, where she was living at the time. She gazed at her reflection in the full-length mirror that was propped against the wall as she styled her hair and makeup, readying herself to head out into the night. Her long red hair reached the floor, cascading in waves down her back. Sally carefully adorned her eyes with thick black lines in decorative shapes reminiscent of ancient persons in millennia past. Depending on the venue, sometimes Ivy and Sally were the entertainment. They danced on stages, on bars, and in cages. They were always dancing. For years, Sally bartended at the Sink, their all-time favorite hangout. When she was dating DJ Nosferatu, they accompanied him to his gigs all over South Florida, from Miami to Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach. A lot of the same faces appeared at the various parties time and time again. There was this one guy who attended each and every event without fail. He was always dressed in the same gear, a black leather Speedo and combat boots, with his hands tied behind his back and a black blindfold over his eyes. He was super tan with bleach blonde hair and had that tough, leathery skin, like he'd been left out in the sun for far too long. He had a kink for being a slave and was hungry for anyone to do anything to him. So they did. Ivy and Sally locked him in cages, tied him up in the women's bathroom, and encouraged other femmes to whip him, and wrote degrading statements all over his body with black Sharpie marker. Hurt me, feed me, spank me, do anything, drawing arrows to his various orifices. He was begging for it and loved every minute of it. One time they were at a smaller venue and he was standing around, not getting much attention. His blindfold was around his neck loose and he just looked pathetic. He was eyeing Ivy and Sally as they sipped on their drink of choice, purple Long Island iced teas. The purple came from a topping of Chambord. So Ivy walked over to him. "I noticed you staring at us. What do you want?" "Feed me." "Feed you what?" "Anything you want." "Anything?" "Anything." Ivy already had a few Long Islands in her and came up with a great idea. She kept thinking blood was going to pool up inside her and fill up all the inner cavities of her body, that she was going to drown in her own blood. There was a part of her that knew this didn't make any sense, but still she couldn't shake the feeling. Night after night they partied. Ivy was sure some of the people they hung out with were capable of committing a similar crime. Many friends died over the years from a variety of circumstances. Friends overdosed a few times and ambulances were called to rush them to the hospital. One time, two friends who were near death spoke afterwards. It turned out they both had similar experiences while they were unconscious. They found themselves in a liminal realm where they were able to communicate with one another. There's a video of it, you know. Every time she drifted off to sleep, she woke startled. She felt as if she couldn't breathe, like she had stopped breathing. It felt as if her heart had stopped beating for a moment. But that's impossible, of course. Ivy had lived through a plethora of such experiences. Fortunately, she never had to witness death as it was occurring. At least not yet. Knock on wood. As she exhaled a cloud of smoke, Ivy tasted the clove on her lips. It reminded her of Sally and another time in their lives. At fetish parties, Ivy and Sally created special performances. They dressed up in various looks and danced on stage for all to admire. They took turns tying each other up. Sally whipped Ivy for a while, then Ivy turned Sally around and dripped hot candle wax on her ass. All the while, they'd be making out and dancing closely, removing articles of each other's clothing, so they were both in various stages of undress. They had the best times together. Ivy and Sally were usually hanging out with this girl, Lucy. Her parents were hippies turned yuppies that apparently thought it was funny to name their daughter Lucinda Samantha Delano, so her initials spelled out LSD. Everyone in her all of her friends called her Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds for obvious reasons, and as fate would have it, she always had acid on her. She was happy to dish it out to friends and acquaintances alike. If she met someone who had never tripped before, she'd tell them to stick out their tongue, and without giving it a second thought, she'd tear off a perforated tab and stick it in their mouth. Most people had no idea what was in store. They all used to hang out on the 9th floor of an abandoned hotel called the Mutiny. Back in the day, it was a really swank place where cocaine cartels hung out and did their dealings. Every room was decorated with a different theme: jungle, futuristic, Japanese, Arabian Nights, and there was a nightclub on the first floor. Ivy later learned that this place was the basis for the Babylon Club, the main hangout of the drug dealers in the film Scarface. After its heyday in the 70s and 80s, the Mutiny eventually shut down. By the time Ivy and her friends arrived, it was just gray cinder blocks. There were no rooms, no drywall, no walls even. It had been completely gutted after Hurricane Andrew. Every floor was identical to the last, stretching 12 stories high. The roof was a favorite hangout of theirs. That's probably enough, right?
You had me hooked. I was
time.
Very cool.
Oh no, that was
Very
beautiful. Cool. Yeah. And it reminded me of so much, and like we're talking about these kind of like tethers and you know, the nostalgia loops and that sort of thing, and the marker on the face, it's probably around the same time, reminded me of this. If you can see that.
Oh yeah.
The PJ. Yeah. PJ Harvey. Doc Martens thing. I don't know. It just I was making notes. It was like, oh, Mutiny. I swear I've heard that before. You know, in different texts and stuff like Mutiny. I think also there's one in Denver, but I think there was one in New York too. Mutiny Cafe, I want to say.
Yeah, but now the hotel's reopened, and because like everything is fucking commodified, the hotel exists, and they used to give out these gold cards to the cartel guys, and like if you had a gold card, you get like VIP service or whatever. So now they have like the emblem of like the picture of the pirate's face that was on these gold cards, like embroidered on the like hotel bathrobes, and on the tables like in the lobby they have like little placards where they talk about the cocaine cowboys like on the hotel, and it's like a fancy hotel now, you know. It's just like,
so you
what is wrong with everybody?
when I was talking with you and Caitlin Boise, who's an incredible artist, by the way, you had mentioned meeting. I thought there was some imagery about a hotel as well. Yeah. If I remember correctly. Oh, I remember there was Houdini.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
We went to Houdini's house.
Houdini's house. That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, and Houdini's grave. They're both in New York. His grave is in Queens, and his house is up in the Bronx. It was for sale, so I got to go in and pretend I was like interested.
That's my favorite. And you ate the like scones and you know, did the tour, right?
Exactly.
And you got to go, yes, this will do.
Oh yes.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Gangster Hotel sounds like a good B movie. I think.
Yeah.
I think like Snakes on a Plane. That's all you need. Cocaine Gangster Hotel. Like I think.
Yeah.
I like titles in threes.
Just writes itself.
Houdini Hotel Grave.
Yeah. It is weird. I don't even want to get into it too much, but you talking about that, like I was just thinking about earlier this week. Weirdly enough, another based on a dream I had, but I grew up outside of Youngstown, Ohio, and basically like a mob-run town. Which and like I actually knew mobsters. Like one of my friends was dating one, and like it's a long story. I don't want to get into it. It's just very strange. One of those things that's like normalized when you're a kid. Then you get older, and you're like, yeah, it's kind of weird that like I knew a bunch of children of mobsters and like hung out with.
There's a lot of gangsters in Miami still.
Yeah, and like that charged word liminal that
I'm sure
you used
Youngstown
was like very much like that tether of the excavation of dying or dead kind of edify. I don't know how you pluralize that, but you know what I mean. Like there's this urban excavation, or how do you say it? Urban adventuring with rundown places and like this kind of beauty in broken down hotels or like amusement parks in Chernobyl, these things that are like still standing but are just like these haunted artifacts of a time, gone. And you actually being able to like exist and have a life. It reminds me of my time in Oakland, very much so. When I was living there, it was very much like warehouse spaces, renovated, kind of not for public consumption, kind of living situations. And so that was lovely. So things happen, everyone.
Like ruin porn.
Well, it reminds me of all the stories coming out about how the wolves and the worms of Chernobyl are evolving. And they're gaining the
three-eyed fish
will be like worms of Chernobyl are getting superpowers.
Yeah, they've got knees
they're actually
now.
Able to resist. To resist the radiations of those types of catastrophes.
I know there's some. I'm gonna have to read up on that. I know there's some truth to how much radiation does actually influence genetics, but I thought it was kind of subtle. But yeah.
But just like metaphorical too, like the radiation of like this haunted chamber of existence that you're like living in, and there's dark things and echoes happening, but like you're really just there as Vanessa was, like as an artist, just kind of living and surviving in these like weird chambers of hauntological echoes. Like that's radiation,
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And the thing is, like when we were kids, we knew that the hotel was like this like abandoned hotel, but what we had heard was that it was like a disco hotel, and that all the rooms were these different themes. And of course, you assume there's like cocaine going on with like disco or whatever. But that's all we knew. So we had like no idea at the time. And it's only actually since Jessica was killed that then like I started like I think it was on Twitter again. Twitter used to be so good before Musk. Like it really, whatever they did with the algorithms, they really knew to like how to connect you with people. And somehow like I had been like thinking about it and thinking about that place in time a lot when my friend was killed, and then up in my Twitter feed post this like book that this guy wrote called Hotel Scarface, which is all about this specific hotel where he like interviewed all these people and like wrote the entire history of this place and like how it was so like integral to this whole like drug cartel scene. And then I remember like making some like Twitter posts, which I never do these like that feeling when posts, but it was like that feeling when this like old abandoned hotel you used to squat in like turns out to be the like hotel in Scarface kind of thing. And then the guy like wrote me, and then I've had him on my podcast and stuff. So it's just like, so I've only learned all of this like in the past 3 years, which is
do
really
we know
wild.
what number of rendering unconscious that was?
No, I'll find it for you.
Yeah, I'd love that. That's like such a good addendum, to the story.
And he has a podcast too, which is called Full Disclosure. So I named the podcast that because that's like the first time I actually talked about this, because generally all my friends that didn't die during that era, like anyone that's like professional, like nobody talks about this. This was just like what the fuck, Miami. It was wild, and they've all like they've repressed it. They don't tell their partners. They don't tell anybody how wild it was. So this is my first time like really talking about it publicly. Where I was like, okay, just
is it Daniel Jose?
No, his name is Robin Farzad. Here, I'm finding it for you.
And speaking of hauntological echoes, we should mention also that one time in Miami, we decided to check in to
Yes.
not only check in, but actually check into the Mutiny Hotel. And we asked for a room on the 9th floor specifically. And so it happened that we got a room that was in the exact same location with the exact same view as where Vanessa had slept.
That's crazy.
That was wild. Yeah, Carl was like, "How do we make sure we get like the right area?" And I was like, "If we know magic, it's just gonna happen." And we like go and up the elevator, and I'm like, "Whoa, this is wild!" Because this elevator shaft used to be empty and like had this putrid smell because there were like dead bodies at the bottom. And now we're like riding up this elevator shaft, and then we went down the hall, and I'm like, "Oh my god, it's in the same exact corner."
And now there's breath mints on your pillow. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it's so interesting too.
And robes with that pirate on.
Yeah, which was just like mind fuck. Like, what is this? And then
cocaine cowboy robes.
My friend Langston Kahn, who's a great magician in New York, I used to let him like work out of my office when I had an office in New York. I'm a psychoanalyst for anybody who doesn't know that. And Langston used to use my office sometimes on the evenings and the weekends and do these kind of little courses about like, you know, different magical properties. And he talked about like ways to integrate pieces of your soul. And his whole perspective is like when you have these traumas in life, like your mom kicking you out or like and you're living on the streets and things, you like pieces of your soul kind of like come off and get like lost there, and you can actually like go to the physical locations and kind of pick yourself
it's all
up.
made of wood, right? They breathe and they absorb. It makes sense that energy would, you know, be absorbed and echo back. Yeah, so going back to that hotel was like, it was such a visceral experience where I was just like vibrating and like feeling like having so many memories, and it was wild. We stayed there when my first book came out. And I had a book launch in Miami, which was also wild. It's like, wow, I could have died, but instead, look, I'm having a book launch. And now I'm actually in May having a book launch for this book at the bookstore across the street from the hotel in May when I'm in Miami, May 2nd. So we talked about this, how you know, when I was doing the Hauntomancy stuff with Haunt Manual, the first working was year-based, but because, you know, time is linear and we're like, you know, decaying in this kind of somatic linear space, it couldn't take me back into time. So when I thought of 2017, it just brought me back exactly where I was at 2017, but time had, you know, caught up. And it was, that was a very hauntological thing. It's like I was staying in the house where I met my partner. I was working with a company that I hadn't worked with for years of that year that I was, you know, working with and exalting. Like everything kind of made manifest, or like it forced me back into that structure, but you know, time is still how we perceive it in a way. So it's not like time travel, it's you're at the quadrants, you know.
In the appendices of Dr. Robert Crookall's The Study and Practice of Astral Projection, he notes a very peculiar piece from Jeffrey Hodson's The Science of Seership, pertaining to thought forms of deceased children resembling Orthodox angels to grieving parents. Occasional forms, then, by vivifying it, add to the prayer force by which it was originally created and inspired. Had I interlocked on a prayer force, an egregore, a thought form of a past self? Did my meditations and audiomantic praxis create a sort of seance of a still, vibrating spirit? Did my time in the tetrahedron multiversal Sephiroth of galaxy ghosts create this pragmatic tether that is now future casting, future conforming? Did my haunted dances of audiomancy charge this very tether and conform the conduit to what need be or shall be? Is this a wanted or warranted change? Is this what I asked for? I am not perturbed by the cascading dominoes that seem sourced at that 5-year anniversary Sephiroth meditation. I am impressed so much that this probable misfire or overshot illustrates that this nostalgiamancy or hauntomancy This hauntological magical praxis of the self is allowing the ghosts of the past to run the asylum of the future and hopefully lay the rough ones to rest. In this shared somatic realm, we baseline perceive time as wholly linear within the alchemical cycles of birth, breath, and decay. This praxis of charging a certain era of the past to cull an era of the future seems to understand this. Outside deep meditation into memories and relishing in these subconscious haunts, it has seemingly afforded me the quadrants to literally be back here in 2017. Sure, the same places, the same people, the same occupation, yet as every sine wave snake of self is immovable from the construct of literal decay, time hopping is not afforded. This system is brutally imperfect, as are the results, and I have no idea the ramifications.
This is how we began so many times, and also how we ended less than a few. Post facto redacto, pre cum perfecto. On the road, not knowing why. On a stage, not knowing how. Bring on the roaring silence. Bring on synaptic stew. Bring on the third mind that existed between me and you. All is said, all is done. One is dead, one has won. Nothing. We have moved in times and spaces, back and forth and back again. We have left a bunch of traces for no one to see and no one to hear. Hear, hear. This is how we began so many times, and also how we ended less than a few. Post facto redacto, pre cum perfecto. On the road, not knowing why. On a stage, not knowing how. Bring on the roaring silence. Bring on the synaptic stew. Bring on the third mind that existed between me and you. All is said, all is done. One is dead, one has won. Nothing. We have moved in times and spaces, back and forth and back again. We have left a bunch of traces for no one to see and hear. Hear, hear.
Beautiful. A little
Nice.
Will and Carl
Right.
mega mix.
Love
Getting
it.
weird. Getting weird.
No, that I love that track, and also the paintings. Is that yours as well, Carl?
Yeah, it's again, the reason I chose this was that it's for me very multi-leveled, multifaceted, and I'll try to explain it. Again, the song, the actual music, was something that Cotton Ferrex used to use as an intro. When we went on stage, we played this very sort of orchestrated piece of music, and then we drifted into our electronic stuff. But last year, I put together kind of a compilation album by Cotton Ferox called Spiral Assembly Lines, and it is a compilation of like tracks that weren't released on an album. They might have been on compilations, that kind of stuff. And then that was instrumental, so I decided I will make a little poem for that track and record myself and then mix it in with the track. Because what had happened since Cotton Ferox ended, my main musical partner in that project, Thomas Tibert, who was also in White Stains for a bit, he died in 2022. So I decided this poem is about our relationship, basically. And that made a lot of sense, and it still makes a lot of sense. And then, what should I use as imagery in this thing? Then I realized, whoa, I also have some Super 8 scans, again, Super 8, of a film from 1991, I think, that my best friend shot of me and my White Stains partner at the time, and that best friend also died a couple of years ago. So in a way, it's kind of revisiting what's left, the traces that are left, and that film piece was left from my best friend. So I integrated that because it was technically also a White Stains video that was then integrated into this Cotton Ferox video, because it's all the same. It's me, and then I work with people, and we create complete third mind things together. I couldn't do it alone. Actually, I can do it alone, but it's not the same. When we work with someone who is more musically inclined or talented, real magic can happen. And I've always preferred working with people that are very, very talented musically, because then I can sort of rest, not on my laurels, but rest in my position as the motor mouth, in a way, the blabber, or as some people say, the poet. I think this was a good little thing to show here, because it shows the way I work and also we work in this kind of interdimensional or transcendental approach. Could be something old, could be something brand new, could be a memory of someone, or it could be many things, but it becomes very interesting when you put it together. It's not just an excretion in the moment, but something that is not overly strategized either, something intuitive, something emotional, and something, I think, quite beautiful.
Yeah, I think you touched on something deeply with I don't want to say role, but knowing kind of, I guess, a place in that prism when working with somebody. I know Eric and I have a long history of we they meld, a lot of different mediums meld, but with We the Hollowed, it was very much like he is the talented painter. I'm gonna let him do his thing on that one. Maybe I'll do kind of the other things. Sometimes they mix, and sometimes we trade things. But it's just it's wonderful. It's also reminds me of like Vanessa and Caitlin. It reminds me of the stuff with Pete Murphy. Like, it is a third mind. It really is. It's finding the medium in those contrasts too. But beautiful stuff, and very moving, knowing that it's how do I put it? It's a memoriam, a bit,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but not in memoriam. And what's still living? No, I was kidding. That was a terrible segue. I'm not made for this.
That's a tough one.
I'm just gonna draw out the awkward segues, but yes, the disruption generator, Eric Millar, 5 years. And what's funny is this has been a emblematic conversation too, with Carl and Vanessa, Tad. I was working with Disinfo, 2017, I think. That was a year that we met, You know, Bob, we're gonna be on the palm and the egg here soon, right? Which I'd love for you to talk more about all of your wonderful stuff.
The palm of the egg, you say?
Yeah,
that was last year.
That was last year. Oh, damn.
You got another 6 years before that Santa comes back around.
I said soon, okay? But
I mean,
yeah, Disruption
it,
Generator.
Right?
This was the first We the Hollowed outlet press. Me and Eric. I guess, I mean, obviously way more Eric than me.
Yeah.
You know, release when we got into printing. And yeah, the Disruption Generator, the portable Disruption Generator, a wonderful anarchic oracle, 5 years on. And because of this, I created this last year. So, you know, big ups to Eric and helping me weather, I don't know, the small print publishing. I'm sure Carl and Vanessa have all the tales about the tribulations that come with small press and all that. But I'm very excited. It's been 5 years, and this honestly has just been a remarkable piece of work that Eric has. Seemingly, you know, I love that Eric's going to downplay it. I'm going to ruin his lead here. He's going to downplay it. He's going to say that, like, oh, it was all just random, you know, blah, blah, blah. But now there is a tether here, too. And, yeah, every oracle component and oracular in and of itself is kind of a notion that I know Eric is going to downplay as well. But... But yeah, Eric, 5 years of the Disruption Generator.
5 years.
It's honestly been, it's been the mightiest tether of not only of what We the Hollowed has done, but I think anything that I have put maybe a thumbprint on, you know, I had very little to do with the actual creation and wondery that it is.
I mean, you kind of lit the spark because you let me start posting on We the Hollowed, and that was the first thing I did for We the Hollowed.
Yeah,
and
I said, "Here's the login."
Yep, and I panicked and went, "Okay, I'm just gonna do this," and it was like a just 5-minute idea turned into like 6 months of posts.
I mean, it's insane though what it's kind of generated. Not to use the pun, but as far as our kind of confluence within mundane magic, within divergent magic, within like these creative process punks, you know, kind of ideas of creation of ritualization, and it still barks. Yeah, it's incredible. You posted, how many components are there?
120.
120 posts on We the Hollowed. Every component had a post. You did them daily?
I think it was weekly.
Weekly, yeah.
No, it couldn't have been weekly.
120 weeks.
Had to have been daily. Had to have been daily because I didn't do it for 2 years.
I mean, you've done it for 5 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No. Between this one and between that one and Bottomless Bag.
Bottomless Bag was another major one. I think was it Carl, Vanessa part of that as well?
I'm not sure if they were. I can't remember everybody who was involved in that one.
That was another oracle where he took submissions of random words.
Yeah, lists of random stuff.
Yeah. And he created an oracular device. But yeah, I mean, it's just insane to me, and like, and all this talk about, you know, these tethers of these webs of these, you know, outliers, I guess, people that are just so fervent and like creation and anti-authoritarianism. I think that's the longest word in the English language.
So what is it? Tell us what it is.
Yeah,
I call it a bibliomantic oracle. Basically, I took a random word generator and came up with 120 words that I illustrated and turned into. I don't want to call them cards because it's in a book, so I call them components. Right. So.
Oh yes, I've seen this, of course, on Instagram.
Yeah, so like that component, they look like cards. They was actually made into there are 3 copies of a deck that's a friend of mine made. I don't have mine anymore. Keats has one, but
you need a copy of your own deck.
See, I have the,
no, but I kind of love that you don't.
I have the originals.
That's true.
And yeah, so basically every day for 120 days, I would take a random word from a random word generator and then just like draw in these little sketchbooks whatever came to mind when I got a word. Like this was curved and
beautiful. Wonderful.
Yeah. Very cool. Or firearm.
One of my favorite.
That's a good one.
Or contrast.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah.
Let me get the camera here. It's hard. But so yeah, I take whatever popped into my head. I only rejected a couple of words because I couldn't figure out what to draw. And it's all just direct in pen, like basically like just a basic ballpoint pen. And then when it was all done, I collected it up into a book, and yeah, became this.
Yeah. Well, Eric's whole thing too. He, you have been making comics and wonderful. I don't want to say comics because I get like the Scott McCloud like idea of comics in my brain, but not funny books, but like actually beautiful, but also funny books.
They kind of bordered more on like storybooks for adults than comics for most of them.
But you were absolutely the reason why it I wouldn't have got into independent publishing if it wasn't for you. You had already like published a bunch of stuff that just looked brilliant, looked good, and I know we're forever wrestling with it. Amazon or Lulu or something to be egalitarian with the ability to get. And I thought it'd be cool for Carl and Vanessa with Trap Art, to talk to Eric about small publishing and like what you guys do for small publishing, like where, what are the pragmatic sensibilities of it? Like, are there specific companies or printers that you use? Is it, book deal based? Like, what is it?
What is it? We it's a beast. We're working with the big A mostly, and it works well for us in practical sense, financial sense, and for me, these past years have been very, very delightful because I've finally been able to leave an old mind frame because I've been always, attached to some kind of publishing company. I mentioned the fanzines before, addiction to printed matter, then that turned into publishing companies, and I've had many. So, and that's been an old school thinking of, of course, offset printing and making an edition, a big or a small one, basically tying up capital. And then if you have, many titles, that becomes a lot of money, and maybe the books won't, sell so quickly. So it's I don't know. It's been a rocky road. Sometimes good, most often financially quite horrendous. But this new thing with print on demand has allowed me and also us to really go bananas in a way, you know, to take on projects and experiment with stuff, and I actually love it. First of all, not having to tie up any capital into it, and then also what's happened during these past years is also the horrendous increase in postage cost, you know. And I've been based here in Sweden, you know, I have mail order things and sending books.
I would have loved to have sent you an inscribed one. I literally could not afford it at the time.
Right. Well, there you go.
People would order a $10 or $20 book and the shipping is $30. You know, it doesn't make sense.
So I stopped mailing books overseas to people. I was just like, buy it on Amazon, you get local shipping rates. It's like I have to charge you like $60 to send your book over. I mean, it's ridiculous. And some people would pay for it too, and I'm like, really?
Send those people my way. I love those.
I was one of those people, you know, being sort of slightly pseudo bibliophilic, and I don't know, it just doesn't make any sense. You know, the postage is one thing, but also I would rather that the you know, the information or the message or the signal gets out there as widely as possible, rather than satisfy any bibliophiliac, you know, predilections or inclinations.
And, you know, because I exalt the gods of human error, my stuff can be for bibliophiles too, because I have terrible prints of things. You know, but like I think I was one of, I know Eric had been working with Amazon for a while, but I don't think they did hardbacks.
When I was working with KDP, they were not doing hardbacks.
Well, they do now.
They do now, and they're beautiful. They look good. Yeah.
And like the last few books I've done, I printed through. last few I did through Lulu, just to kind of experiment. And there's no distribution model with Lulu. Like it's super bad distribution through Lulu.
That's a bummer, because their books are really
maybe a Blurb have connections to sell via Amazon and stuff like that, so that should be better. But I think the next step for Amazon, I'm not sort of, you know, endorsing them or anything, but the game changer will be when they start using coated paper. You know, when that will be a absolute revelation, and a big game changer for us, since a lot of the books that we're doing, they're not pure textbooks. They contain a lot of photography, they contain a lot of art, and I think that the reproduction on the, you know, white paper they have now is crisp and clear and quite beautiful. But, you know, if we had coated paper, that would be like a wet dream. So, dear Mr. Jeff Bezos,
a white stain.
Please get us some coated paper.
That's why I made my last book at Lulu, actually. Like Wombat.
Yeah. Oh,
is
I was gonna say
uncoated
assemblage, right?
That was not uncoated paper though. That's why I did.
That book. It's so beautiful.
Oh,
it's amazing. Yeah. Have you seen? Yeah. But also, I also put Bob Raw, the Listening Post Alpha books on Amazon. They're incredible. That to me, like that's with Groucho Trout's. I don't have it in here right now, but with his art and everything, and it's black and white. Like the aesthetic is perfect for, you know, the Amazon paperback. But this is Lulu, not Lulu. It is Lulu.
That one's Lulu.
Okay.
So I just didn't use coated paper for that book.
This is my favorite of Eric's books. It's like a Sun Tzu of, you know, anarchic magic.
I love that book.
It's brilliant.
Thank you.
And I couldn't be more proud to have just that little seal on there. I have nothing to do with this. Didn't do a thing with it.
Well, we're a collective.
I'm a part of it. Yeah.
We're a collective. Like we put that seal on anything, and everybody. It's everybody's victory.
Well,
it's basically me and Eric. We say collective because you know, we're schizophrenic.
You're multi-dimensional.
Transdimensional.
That you guys have gone to do for Amazon. Amazon is such a necessary evil, and the only thing I wanted to get in there, it sucks because that's, I mean, is a much smaller publisher than than even what you guys are doing. I came to basically.
I mean,
the same
yeah,
conclusion. It's just
Ted,
like,
you know, we live in Seattle.
It's your best option, unfortunately. And, yeah, and yes, and if you guys hate Amazon, trust me, as somebody from Seattle and lived here for 20 years, we hate them way more than you do. It sucks. It hurts. But again, that's like it's the better off.
But boy, howdy, can you get your
What are you
Pokemon cards real quick? You know. But yeah, it's and I put, like I said, Bob Ross listening post alpha books in here. I'll share this because
I'm working on my 5th Amazon book right now, you know.
Oh, I have the Temple of Babylon Kronzon one in the show notes too. With
Thank
you
I
that Leah put. Yeah,
there's 2 of those. There's one, but the thing with that is that I was shopping them around to some publishers, and they would want me to take one thing out or another thing out, or
right.
I don't understand why this or why that, or I don't think this will sell. And I was like, well, who cares? Like, I don't, you know what I mean? It's not, that's not my point of making these books, is really to sell a lot of them. I've sold a lot more than I thought I would, you know, but, it's just like, it kind of, the deal with Amazon is it kind of reminds me of like back in the day doing zines with, you know, you'd have to go to some other corporate place like Kinko's or whatever, Kinko's, you know, and you know they weren't like a great corporation or anything, but you still used what you had at hand, and
that's a fantastic way to look at it. Yeah, it very much is. You're not missing the processes unless you were the part of the processes were to actually print and bind the books. If that's not part of your processes, then think of Amazon.
Which I would love to get into that, you know what I mean? But
me too.
It's just,
absolutely.
Well, I know, you know, and I know there's some people out there in the occult community who are actually pretending to do that as well, and just going through Amazon and then for doing these like hardcover books and then charging you like $90, $100 or whatever, and you know, so. there's lots of fun little tricks and games like that going on, which you really should. You know, you should really check out your occult publishers, you know, before.
I love those like niche warning labels you got to put.
Wads of cash.
Yeah.
But like the LPA books, they don't sell as great because they're a little more expensive. But the thing is there's so many people involved that I want, you know, if something, you know, if it sells, then I want everybody to get paid, you know, a little bit at least. And the thing is though, is that I also don't really want that many people reading those books. Like I don't want, you know, I want it to be kind of exclusive. So I'm not trying to make it any easier. You know, I mean, I guess I could sell PDFs and this and that, and the other thing, but you know, it's kind of like, giving somebody nuclear codes nuclear codes to your insides and, you know, all this kind of stuff. Like the work going on with LPA can be very personal to very like macrocosmic and scarily like prophetic, you know, and so, you know, sometimes I even you know, I'm kind of like, should I be publishing this stuff? So it's all right. I want to keep it exclusive, you know, so I'm not like doing any deals or anything.
No, that's
artwork. Did you do this artwork
for listening post alpha? That's Groucho Trout, Agent 444. He's in Louisville, Kentucky. Yeah, he's been
in the chat.
Yeah, he should be in the chat.
He was in the chat. Yeah, I don't know if he's still there. I hope so. He should come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the Listening Post Alpha Journal 1. That's
there's also a lot of great art from my partner Leah, she's also Agent 777, and like this setup behind me was done by her. And she's also a great artist, and she does a lot of really good work in these journals as well. But very proud of them, but exclusive.
Yeah, she's incredible, amazing artist. Yeah, the Temple of Babylon Kronzon book too, which I was trying to find. Folks can find it in the links in the details of the YouTube video of Honquinox. But that one, it's so funny because I was talking with Vanessa on her last podcast about, you know, this kind of synchronistic, you know, I'm working what I think, or what I posit is like a self that's not yet realized, or you know what I mean? And then like trying to find words for it, and ultra terrestrials come up, and is it the other, and what's the HGA? And around that time, Bob Raw and Listening Post Alpha, like, came into the purview as like, they were cadets of the ultra terrestrial army or something. It was incredible. So like, they had already put out a book,
which we're groundless though, really. We're constantly like, well, we don't know what this is. We're just having these experiences,
right?
We
and
don't
that's
really
what I mean.
hang
It's
on
like,
to
hey, don't worry,
Yeah.
you're not alone. You won't understand this either.
Yeah, we don't really work with a clear metaphysical grounding. Sometimes we try, but every time you really try to cling on to that, it feels like maybe not the point.
It's not the point. Yeah, and I think that's what I keep coming back down to, especially within the stuff that with Divergent Magic or Haunt Manual. It's like it's not conclusion based, it's not results based. Like that, all of that can apply later, but finding passion in actually the practice and creating and doing it, like that should be result alone. Yeah. But what is it? Is it an ultra-terrestrial? Is it me outside of time? I don't know, but it's fun.
Well, I think ultra-terrestrial gives us enough. Ultra-terrestrial gives you enough ground to kind of cover all the experiences, because they happen here on Earth. They're in confluence with all types of forces, and
it's a great catch-all. Like a beautiful catch-all.
I also recall, since we have some Topi members here, there's a great piece in the Topi Bible about the ultra-terrestrials, and it kind of embracing this idea that the ultra-terrestrials are kind of like our overlords. They kind of have manipulated us in negative ways. They're always manipulating
like archons
us. And I think that's pretty great. I was reading that, like, I think it's called the Green Book, and I'm not even sure who actually wrote it, but it was pretty close to what kind of Keel's conclusion about the whole thing. That the history of religion and spirituality has always had this sort of parasitic function, that and that we're kind of being led around like Pavlov's dogs by these entities that need our energy for whatever reason, and so they use us to create certain types of situations so they can feed, like Garmon Bozia and Twin Peaks, and something like some kind of model like that. So but to me that's even too complicated. That's like even too much explanatory power. Like I don't, you know what I mean? I try to
answer lustful.
I'm working on the new journal, and we go down so many paths, and I try to show that spirit work is always going to bring you, you're always going to be like led down these strange paths, and sometimes they're kind of archetypal and almost the same. Like, I started working with like Templar spirits, and of course they want me to go take Jerusalem, right? I start working with, so it's like they pretty much will form, if there's anything actually there, they're going to form, which of course I can't do. Why would they ask me to do that?
Hey, could you take Jerusalem?
But please? Exactly. It's like, no, that doesn't, I can't I have to go to work tomorrow, I can't go take Jerusalem. But that's very common, with Enochian work and all this kind of stuff, is because not only are the suggestions there, but like for me, it was like when I started doing this work, that was not anything that ever was on my mind, but you start being led down these paths of esoteric research, kind of out of nowhere, and there's a sense to where it's like pre-scripted, and then so I feel like the stuff that's more real is really the stuff that doesn't feel pre-scripted, that takes you somewhere different and takes you off the path it takes you, I guess, on a path of divergence, you know, away from those types of things. But I still feel like it's worth going down those paths to see kind of. It's like I had this dream once where I was in this huge factory, and I was like, what is this place? And they're like, this is the storehouse of images. And I was like, is this it? You know, are you fucking serious? And it's just this big shitty factory with all the, you know, almost like Amazon or something, you know,
There's
it's like you
nothing
can just
pretty to
reach
look
out,
at.
grab it all, and sort of at least get a simulated experience of it, you know? And so, yeah, I resist those things, but I also sometimes will go in and play with them to sort of exhaust them, you know.
Oh, that's a really, yeah.
I think there's a lot of people that I think that's what I think that's what a lot of people are doing in
I've been
Magic today.
doing that
Really, whether they,
with Dakota
you know what I
Slim
mean? Like
for
it's
years.
like you go in to banish, you know, to get rid of that that hang up or that notion or whatever, you know.
Well, like the heteronyms too, just of like constructs of, you know, different hats, you know, that you wear with different monikers or whatever. I honestly feel, I've been joking about this for years, but with Dakota Slim, it's like I've been trying to kill this motherfucker for like 10 years, you know. Like I want to exhaust him. Like stop. I want to move on. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, that's kind of the work I'm doing now. I'm doing some work like that with this entity called Schmitty, you know, that's like very tied into childhood trauma. And it also has this sort of this terrible synchronistic, like domino effect that comes after it, you know, that kind of spreads out and comes back to mock me through several different channels, you know. And so I'm doing this sort of hauntomantic, audiomantic work in private. Like I don't think I'll ever put this stuff out, you know, but because it's you know, it's tied to me, it's tied to other people that died that I was very close to when I was a child, you know. And to kind of get in there and work with that's the kind of really important work, I think, you know, to try to like.
Yeah, I just want to say I laughed because when he said I don't think I'll ever put this out, that's like exactly what I've been doing for the past 2 years.
Yeah, I mean I do so much stuff that a lot of the stuff, I mean I have so much that I can put out and so much I can hold back now, and I'm getting, it's honestly, it's like the stuff that it's like that I can hold back is becoming more seductive, you know, to like just do things secretly and exclusively share, you know.
Well, then you know, to go back and to kind of tie up this, you know, first segment, I think we all have parlayed whatever kind of I almost said energies and I meant it, you know what I mean? So forgive me. But like, you know, whatever energies there are for those tethers, that web of like what's like these people, these things, these ideas that kind of, you know, obfuscate the normal beaten paths, the obviousness, you know. I think that's been a huge theme of this talk entirely. And I think all of that is part and parcel to that. And I know because I'm psychically in tune with Vanessa and Carl's dog that
the dog is whining and we have to take her out.
The dog is biting my ankle right now in the spectral form.
You're just looking very sad at me.
Yeah. I know, I'm feeling you. I shut my door. Luckily, Mary's home, so I'm not getting a lot of.
I put links there that you can keep in touch. Carl's main website, Mindway website, our Patreon, and I put Psych Art Cult there because we do this series of events on psychoanalysis, art, and the occult. And like we have one coming up in May where it's called Harnessing the Magic and Creative Power of the Cut-Up Method, a la William Burroughs, David Bowie, and Genesis Peerage. And we did this class in the fall last year, and Luxa was there, and it was really great. And it was actually like, it turned out to be this like huge magical working in itself, which I hadn't expected, but it was a nice surprise. We presented like, they're 4 2-hour classes and they're on Sundays. And the first class is more like the history of the Dadas and the beads and that kind of thing. And then we go into like Bowie and Genesis and Topi. And What I ended up doing last week on Jen's death day, which was the 14th of March, I decided to put like a whole slideshow together, like PowerPoint, going through the whole exhibition that we went to in Prague with like shots of the rooms and then shots of all the individual paintings, so that we can talk about like how all these are magical workings and how they fit together. So we're going to talk about that in the class as well, and then our own practices and stuff like that. So that should be fun if you're interested. So I put a link to that. And then like in the summer, the link's not up yet, but Carl's going to be teaching a class on like Anton LaVey's different magical concepts and the ways to integrate those into your life, which is also going to be a 4-week class, I think in July. So that's going to be good. And then in the autumn, Carl's teaching a class on occult cinema and magic in cinema, which is going to be really good too.
It's my jam.
Yeah, so we have big classes coming up. And then at our Patreon, specifically like you were just talking about, Bob, it's like we talk about the more like, we talk about everything pretty openly, but like we talk about more private things. And
it's wonderful. Not only is it like a look into both of your like jet setting, wonderful, lives, but it's ritualistic in and of itself. Magic Mondays, the every 23rd of the month, get new playlists. I love just how interactive it is. It's a wonderful Patreon. It's well worth however much it costs. So
yeah, $5 or whatever. And there's a Discord server that we set up a few months ago. So now we have a Discord where people can chat like this all the time. Yeah, I don't think you're in there, Keats. You should be in the Discord.
I'm a weirdo. I'm weird with Discord. We have We the Hollow Discord, and Eric can tell you okay, hey everybody, this is what's happening. Goodbye.
Well, you should both come to Discord. I love Discord. It's like an old school chat room where it's just like no ads, no weirdos that you don't know coming in and yelling at you. It's just like like-minded people like this. Well, you can talk kind of pretty openly too. At least our Discord's like that.
Yeah, I'm sure you have cultivated a wonderful community, and I will join that Discord. That is one that I will join.
To Discord, it's super fun, and then we chat like this. Like every day, I check the Discord and I make sure I chat with everyone and post things, and all the news goes there first and stuff. I put pictures of Jen's exhibit up there and everything.
I did see some of that. I think you posted on Twitter or something, or Instagram. I don't know. See, I don't even know.
Whatever in the digisphere.
I saw it somewhere once. Yeah.
No matter what, I take my leave and walk the dog.
Yes, please walk the dog.
Be
shake
safe
a leg
out there in hometown.
Or shake 2 legs.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Have a good night.
Thank you so much for showing up. Appreciate you both.
sky.